the Extension Agriculture Institute, your connection to the latest agriculture and horticulture research from the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
In terms of how you seed the cover crops, there are a bunch of different options. Most of us as vegetable growers don't have access to seed drills and other large-scale equipment, and it might not be a good fit for you anyway. But there are a lot of other simpler options, right down to the simplest thing of all, which is just broadcasting the seed out there by hand and raking it into the ground so that you get good seed to soil contact. You can use some of the direct seeders that you might have on hand as a vegetable grower, even something like an earthway seeder. And then in between those options, there are things like hand crank seeders that will scatter the seed over a slightly larger area. There are drop seeders you can get. Some of this is going to be lawn equipment, and it's worth checking out some of that equipment that is designed for use with lawns because it's going to work often at a smaller scale. Figuring out what is a good fit for you depends a lot on how you grow, whether you're growing in maybe an established permanent or semi-permanent bed, or whether you're growing on a slightly larger scale. And also it's going to depend a little bit on the soil type, what is going to work best for you. So we're going to showcase a few different options, and they're just places for you to get started and start thinking about what is the best fit for you. So when you go to buy cover crop seed, there are a lot of different suppliers. You can often get it from your regular vegetable seed supplier, but you might find better prices at some of the larger retailers that are more aimed at larger scale farms. Now, if you're going to them, often the smallest quantity of seed you'll be able to buy is 50 pounds, which is probably going to be a lot in your system. You might be able to split a bag with a neighbor or a friend, but you might also want to consider storing some of that seed. A lot of cover crop seeds will store for 2 to 5 years. You want to store it dry and cool, just like you would for vegetable seed. We're out here in the field to demonstrate a few different methods of sowing rye seed. At this point in the season, late October, rye is one of the best options for a cover crop that's still going to germinate and give us some growth before the winter. So the simplest thing to do is to just broadcast seed by hand and then rake it in a little bit. So we've got some bags of rye here. I brought up a couple of different rakes and a little rotary cultivator, and we'll give those a try. If you have a larger area to broadcast seed, you can certainly use something like one of these little earthway crank seeders. You just slip that on over your body, put the seed in here, and you're going to crank the handle, and that spreads the seed out for about a 20-foot width, depending on how fast you crank the handle. So we'll go over this in a little bit more detail, but that's a nice option for spreading seed over a wider area. Another option we have over here is actually a bit of lawn equipment. It's a drop seeder. It's about 22 inches wide. And this does a pretty nice job with a lot of different grass seeds like oats or rye, or something like perennial ryegrass if you're establishing more of a long-term cover crop area. So this has worked really well for us. Now, if you're considering a seeding method that is broadcasting onto the surface of the ground, ideally you're going to do something to improve the seed to soil contact so that that seed is in really good contact with the soil and it can take up moisture and germinate and start to grow. So even if you just take a rake, if you're working in a small area, and just lightly rake that in, that's going to improve your germination of the cover crop. Because germination will be a bit lower when you're broadcasting, it's a good idea to increase your seeding rate. Generally, you'll see a range of amounts for seeding rates. So for oats, for example, you might see anywhere from 20 to 50 pounds per acre. And if you're going to be broadcasting, you want to be at the higher end of that. And sometimes if people are working with a fairly inexpensive cover crop seed, they'll double or even triple the seeding rate just to make sure that they get a really good stand.